Diana Archer sat in the small maintenance office at Nelly's Air Force Base in Nevada, reviewing work orders for aircraft inspections. Her civilian clothes, simple khakis and a polo shirt with the contractor logo, marked her as support staff. Not military, not important. At 60 years old, with steel gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck, Diana looked like someone's aunt who'd taken a job to supplement her retirement income. The young pilots who rushed past her office barely acknowledged her existence. "Excuse me, ma'am," a lieutenant called through the door, not bothering to stop. "My jet needs a pre-flight check. Can you find someone to do that?" Diana looked up from her paperwork. "I am someone who can do that, Lieutenant." The pilot paused, looking skeptical. "I mean a qualified mechanic. This is an F-35. It's not like changing oil in a car." "I'm aware of what an F-35 requires," Diana said evenly. "No offense, but I need someone certified. Can you call the maintenance chief?" Diana bit back her first response. "I'll handle it." After the lieutenant left, Diana sighed and returned to her work. This happened several times a day. Young pilots, mostly men, but some women too, who assumed that a 60-year-old female civilian couldn't possibly understand advanced military aircraft. If they only knew. Diana had been working at Nelly's for 2 years as a civilian contractor in the maintenance division. She coordinated inspections, managed work orders, and occasionally did hands-on mechanical work when the regular crews were overwhelmed. It was quiet work, anonymous work, exactly what she'd wanted when she'd taken the job. Her supervisor, Chief Master Sergeant Raymond Torres, appeared in her doorway. "Diana, got a minute?" "Of course, Chief." Torres sat down, his expression serious. "I just got chewed out by that lieutenant. He said he asked you to find a mechanic and you told him you'd handle it." He waited 40 minutes before someone showed up. "I called Martinez immediately. He was finishing another job. I gave the lieutenant an accurate time frame." "The lieutenant says you were dismissive and unprofessional." Diana kept her voice calm. "I informed him I could perform the inspection myself. He insisted on a qualified mechanic. I provided one." "Diana, you know how pilots are. They want to see someone in a flight suit or coveralls. You're sitting here in an office in civilian clothes. They don't take you seriously." "That's their problem, not mine." Torres sighed. "Look, I know you're overqualified for this position. I've seen your contractor resume. You've got certifications on more aircraft types than most of my mechanics combined. But these young pilots don't know that. They just see a civilian administrator." "Again, that's their problem." "It becomes my problem when they complain to the wing commander. Can you just, I don't know, be more accommodating?" Diana looked at Torres, who'd always been respectful to her, and softened slightly. "I'll try, Chief, but I won't apologize for being competent." "Fair enough." After Torres left, Diana returned to her work, but she felt the familiar frustration building. She'd spent 40 years in aviation, more time than most of these pilots had been alive. And yet they looked at her and saw, what? A secretary, a clerk, someone to fetch coffee. That evening, Diana drove home to her small house in Las Vegas, about 30 minutes from the base. She lived alone. Her husband had died 5 years ago. Her children were grown and scattered across the country. Inside, she poured a glass of wine and sat in her living room. On the wall was a single framed photograph, her decades younger, standing in front of an experimental aircraft, wearing a flight suit and a confident smile. She almost never looked at that photo anymore. It was from a different life. Her phone rang. It was her son Marcus calling from Seattle. "Hi, Mom, how was work?" "Same as always. Young pilots treating me like I'm invisible." Marcus laughed. "You could always tell them who you really are." "That's not who I am anymore. I'm just Diana Archer, civilian contractor." "You're Diana Archer, test pilot legend, first woman to fly the—" "Marcus," Diana interrupted, "that was a long time ago." "It's still true. Mom, why are you working this job? You could be consulting for aerospace companies, teaching at universities, running programs. Instead, you're doing paperwork at a military base where nobody knows who you are." "Because I like the quiet," Diana said. "I spent 40 years with everyone knowing my name, watching my every move, expecting perfection. Now I just want to work without that pressure." "But you're wasting your expertise." I'm using my expertise just fine. I make sure aircraft are maintained properly. I catch errors that younger mechanics miss. I keep pilots safe even if they don't know it. After the call, Diana sat alone with her thoughts. Marcus was right in some ways. She was overqualified for her position. But he didn't understand the relief of anonymity after a lifetime in the spotlight. Diana had been one of the most famous test pilots of her generation. She'd flown experimental aircraft that pushed the boundaries of speed and technology. She'd been the first woman to fly several classified programs. She'd broken speed records, survived crashes, and trained dozens of pilots who went on to distinguished careers. And then her husband had gotten sick, cancer. She'd retired from test flying to care for him, spending his final 3 years making sure he was comfortable and loved. After he died, she'd been lost. Aerospace companies had offered her consulting positions. The Air Force had asked her to return to active duty in an advisory role. Universities had wanted her to teach. But Diana had been tired. Tired of being Diana Archer, aviation pioneer. Tired of speeches and ceremonies and expectations. So she'd applied for a simple job at Nellie's under her married name. She'd flown under her maiden name, Richardson, and taken a position that let her work with aircraft without the pressure of her reputation. For 2 years, it had been perfect. But lately, the disrespect was wearing on her. The next morning, Diana arrived at Nellie's to find the maintenance office in chaos. A major training exercise was scheduled for that afternoon. Red Flag, the intensive combat training program that brought pilots from around the world to Nellie's. "Diana, thank God," Torres said when he saw her. "We're short-staffed. Martinez called in sick, Johnson's wife went into labor, and we've got 30 aircraft that need pre-flight inspections by 1300 hours. What do you need from me? Can you do hands-on inspections? I know it's not usually your job, but I'm certified on most of what's flying today. Give me assignments." Torres handed her a list. "You're a lifesaver." Diana changed into coveralls and headed to the flight line. She was assigned to inspect 3 F-35s, 2 F-16s, and an F-15. Routine work, but time-consuming. She started with the first F-35, working through the checklist methodically. She'd inspected thousands of aircraft in her career, including experimental prototypes far more complex than anything in active service. An F-35 held no mysteries for her. Halfway through her inspection, a pilot approached. It was the same lieutenant from yesterday. "What are you doing?" he demanded. Diana looked up from the landing gear she was inspecting. "Pre-flight inspection." You're not a mechanic." "I'm a certified aircraft mechanic with qualifications on this aircraft type." "I don't care what certifications you claim to have. Get away from my jet. I want a real mechanic." Diana stood up slowly, keeping her voice level. "Lieutenant, I am a real mechanic, and I'm performing a required inspection. If you have concerns, you can speak with Chief Torres." "I have concerns about some civilian woman crawling around on advanced military hardware. You probably don't even know what you're looking at." Diana felt her patience snap. "This is an F-35A Lightning II. The landing gear I'm inspecting is a hydraulic system with a backup nitrogen blowdown system. I'm checking for fluid leaks, proper extension and retraction, tire wear, and brake functionality. I've found no issues. Is there something specific about the landing gear you'd like me to explain, Lieutenant?" The pilot stared at her, taken aback by her technical response. "I still want someone else," he said stubbornly. "That's your prerogative, but you'll wait another 2 hours for someone to become available, or you can accept my inspection and make your flight time." The lieutenant hesitated, clearly torn between his ego and his schedule. Before he could respond, another voice called out, "Lieutenant Morrison, is there a problem?" A colonel approached, his flight suit indicating he was a senior pilot. Diana didn't recognize him. "Sir, this civilian is working on my aircraft. I requested a qualified mechanic." The colonel looked at Diana, then at the lieutenant. "Did you check her credentials?" "She claims to be certified, but—" "Did you verify?" Morrison looked uncomfortable. "No, sir." The colonel pulled out his phone and scanned the QR code on Diana's badge. A screen popped up showing her certifications. His eyes widened slightly. "Lieutenant, this contractor is certified on 43 different aircraft types, including this one. She has more experience than anyone in our maintenance division except possibly Chief Torres. I suggest you let her do her job." Morrison's face reddened. "Yes, sir." He walked away without apologizing. The colonel looked at Diana with new curiosity. 43 aircraft types? That's remarkable. How long have you been working in aviation?" "A while," Diana said neutrally. "Military background?" "Some." The colonel seemed to sense she didn't want to discuss it. "Well, carry on, and thank you for your service, whatever it was." Diana nodded and returned to her inspection. But she could feel things shifting. The colonel had seen her credentials. Questions would be asked. Her anonymity was beginning to crack. And Diana didn't know if that was a good thing or a disaster waiting to happen. The red flag exercise began that afternoon. Diana watched from the maintenance area as dozens of fighters took off in waves. F-35s, F-16s, F-15s, and even some older F-18s flown by Navy pilots participating in the joint exercise. The noise was tremendous. The precision was beautiful. Diana had always loved watching aircraft in flight, the way they moved through the sky with purpose and grace. She remembered what it felt like to be in the cockpit, pushing the limits of speed and performance. She didn't miss the pressure of test flying, but she missed the flying itself. "Impressive, isn't it?" Diana turned to see the colonel from earlier. Up close, she could read his name tape, Walker. "Yes, sir, always impressive." "I looked into your file a bit more after our encounter this morning," Walker said. "Your work history shows you've been at Nellie's for 2 years. Before that, there's a gap. 10 years with no employment records in the system." Diana said nothing. "Before that gap, you worked for several major aerospace contractors, always in testing and evaluation divisions. But the specific projects are all classified or redacted." Walker studied her face. "That's unusual for a civilian contractor." "I worked on sensitive programs," Diana said carefully. "I can see that, but I can't see what those programs were. That level of classification usually means experimental aircraft or weapon systems." He paused. "Were you a test pilot?" Diana met his eyes. "I was many things in my career, Colonel. Now I'm a maintenance contractor. That's all that matters." "With respect, I disagree. We have junior pilots like Morrison who treat our experienced contractors with disrespect because they don't understand the expertise around them. If you have a background in test flying." "My background is my business," Diana said firmly. "I'm here to do a job. I do it well. That's enough." Walker nodded slowly. "All right, I respect your privacy, but if you ever want to share your experience with our pilots, give them some perspective, I'd welcome it." "Thank you, sir, but I prefer to work behind the scenes." The exercise continued through the afternoon. Diana returned to her office work, processing inspection reports and coordinating maintenance schedules. Around 1600 hours, alarms suddenly blared across the base. Diana stepped outside to see emergency vehicles racing toward the runway. Something had gone wrong. Chief Torres ran past and Diana grabbed his arm. "What happened?" "F-16 lost an engine on approach. Pilots trying to land on one engine." Diana's heart jumped. She ran toward the maintenance observation area where she could see the runway. In the distance, an F-16 was approaching, trailing smoke. The pilot was fighting to keep the aircraft level. Landing a fighter with one engine was extremely difficult. The asymmetric thrust made the aircraft want to spin. Diana watched with professional assessment. The pilot was overcorrecting, making the approach unstable. At this rate, he'd either overshoot the runway or come in too hard and crash. Without thinking, Diana grabbed a radio from a nearby maintenance cart and switched to the tower frequency. "Tower, this is Archer. Patch me through to that F-16. "Who is this?" the tower responded. "Diana Archer, civilian contractor. I'm a qualified pilot. Patch me through, now." There was a pause, then the tower controller made the connection. "F-16 in distress, this is Archer on ground frequency. Do you copy?" "Copy, Archer." The pilot's voice was tight with stress. "I'm having trouble maintaining approach angle with asymmetric thrust." "I know you're overcorrecting. Small inputs. Trust your training. Use rudder to counter the yaw, not aileron." "I'm trying, but—" "Stop thinking about the broken engine. Fly the good engine. Make it your center line, small corrections. You've trained for this." Diana's voice was calm, authoritative. She'd talked dozens of test pilots through emergency situations. This was familiar territory. The F-16 steadied slightly. "That's better," Diana said. "Maintain that angle. You're going to come in a little fast, but that's okay. The runway is long enough." "Copy." "On touchdown, be ready for the aircraft to pull toward the dead engine. Rudder and brake to counter. You've got this." The F-16 approached the runway, still trailing smoke but more stable now. The landing gear came down. Diana held her breath. The aircraft touched down hard but straight. The pilot immediately applied brakes and rudder, keeping the F-16 on the center line as it rolled out. Emergency vehicles followed it down the runway. The aircraft came to a stop, and the pilot climbed out, clearly shaken but unhurt. Diana set down the radio, her hands trembling slightly. The adrenaline of the moment was fading, replaced by the realization of what she'd just done. She'd broken her anonymity. She'd revealed capabilities that would raise questions. Colonel Walker appeared beside her. "That was exceptional work, Ms. Archer. You may have just saved that pilot's life." "He saved his own life. I just provided guidance." "Your guidance was expert level. You sounded like a test pilot talking down an emergency." Diana didn't respond. "The wing commander wants to see you," Walker said, "to thank you and get a statement about what happened." Diana's stomach sank. This was exactly what she'd wanted to avoid. An hour later, Diana sat in the wing commander's office. Brigadier General Patricia Hayes listened to Diana's account of the emergency, nodding thoughtfully. "Ms. Archer, your intervention was crucial. The pilot told me that your voice and instruction helped him maintain focus and execute the landing properly." "I'm glad he's safe, ma'am. Colonel Walker tells me you have an extensive aviation background, though the details are classified or redacted. Can you tell me about your experience?" "I worked in flight testing for many years. I have pilot certifications and experience with emergency procedures." "Are you a civilian test pilot?" Diana hesitated. The truth was going to come out eventually. She could feel it. "I was a military test pilot, ma'am. I retired 10 years ago." General Hayes's eyebrows rose. "Military, what service?" "Air Force." "What was your rank at retirement?" Another hesitation. "Colonel." The general sat back in her chair. "You're a retired colonel working as a civilian maintenance coordinator. That's quite a step down." "I wanted quiet work after retirement." "Did you fly under the name Archer?" "No, ma'am. My maiden name was Richardson." General Hayes went very still. "Colonel Diana Richardson." Diana's heart sank. "Yes, ma'am." Diana Richardson, the test pilot, first woman to fly the X-43, speed record holder. "Among other things, yes, ma'am." The general stared at her in disbelief. "You're Diana Richardson, the Diana Richardson, and you've been working here for 2 years as a civilian contractor and nobody knew." "I used my married name, Archer. I didn't volunteer my background. I just wanted to work quietly." "Colonel Richardson, you're a legend in the aviation community. You've been inducted into the Aviation Hall of Fame. There are aircraft in museums with your name on them, and you're coordinating maintenance work orders." "Yes, ma'am." General Hayes shook her head slowly. "This is extraordinary. Does anyone else know?" "Chief Torres knows I have extensive certifications. He doesn't know the details." "Well, those details are about to become very public. The pilot you helped wants to thank you personally. The media is already asking questions about who talked him down. This is going to be a story." Diana felt her quiet life slipping away. "Ma'am, I would prefer to remain anonymous." "I understand. But Colonel Richardson, or Ms. Archer if you prefer, you just prevented a potentially fatal crash using expertise gained over decades of service. People are going to want to know who you are." "I just want to do my job." "And you'll continue to do it. But the cat's out of the bag now. I'm sorry." Diana left the office feeling like her world was crumbling. The anonymity she'd carefully built was gone. By tomorrow, everyone would know who she was. That evening, she sat in her house, ignoring phone calls from the base public affairs office. She knew what was coming: media interviews, requests for statements, renewed attention on her career. Everything she'd been avoiding. Her phone rang. It was her daughter, Lauren, calling from Chicago. Mom, I just saw the news. They're saying a civilian contractor at Nellie's talked down an F-16 in an emergency. Was that you? Yes. Mom, that's amazing. You saved someone's life. I just provided advice. He did the work. The article says the Air Force won't release your name yet, but there's speculation it was someone with military flight experience. How long before they figure out it's you? They already have. The wing commander knows it'll be public by tomorrow. Lauren was quiet for a moment. How do you feel about that? Honestly, terrible. I wanted to stay anonymous. I know, but Mom, maybe this is a good thing. You've been hiding for 2 years. Maybe it's time to step back into the light. I wasn't hiding, I was healing. Are you healed now? Diana thought about it. I don't know. The next morning, Diana arrived at Nellie's to find everything changed. Word had spread overnight, not to the public yet, but throughout the base. As she walked from her car to the maintenance building, airmen and officers stopped and stared. Whispers followed her. That's her. That's Colonel Richardson. The test pilot legend. Diana kept her head down and kept walking. But when she reached the maintenance area, she found a crowd waiting. Pilots, mechanics, administrative staff. They burst into applause when she appeared. Diana stopped, overwhelmed. Chief Torres stepped forward. Colonel Richardson, on behalf of everyone here, thank you. Thank you for your service, for your expertise, and for what you did yesterday. Diana didn't know what to say. Then Lieutenant Morrison pushed through the crowd. His face was red with embarrassment. Colonel Richardson, I owe you an enormous apology. The things I said to you, the way I treated you. I had no idea who you were. You shouldn't have treated me that way regardless of who I was, Diana said quietly. Morrison nodded. You're right, that's even worse. I was disrespectful to someone doing their job competently. That was wrong, no matter what your background. Apology accepted, Lieutenant. The pilot who'd emergency landed yesterday pushed forward. He was young, maybe 26, and his eyes were bright with emotion. Ma'am, I'm Captain Davis. You saved my life yesterday. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. You executed that landing. I just reminded you of what you already knew. Your voice kept me calm. Your instructions were perfect. I would have panicked without you. Diana looked at his young face and saw all the pilots she'd trained over the years. All the lives she'd touched without fanfare or recognition. Maybe Lauren was right. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Captain Davis, you're a good pilot. You kept your head in a crisis. That's all that matters. General Hayes appeared. Colonel Richardson, can I steal you for a moment? Diana followed her to a private office. The media has confirmed your identity, Hayes said. It's going to be all over the news today. I need to know how you want to handle it. We can release a statement on your behalf, or you can speak to the media yourself. Diana took a deep breath. What would help the Air Force most? Honestly, if you do a brief press conference, show that we have this level of expertise on our bases, that we value experience, it would be good for recruitment, good for morale. One press conference, then I go back to my normal work. Agreed. What Diana didn't know yet was that this press conference would change everything. Not just for her, but for an entire generation of pilots who would learn what real expertise looked like. The press conference was scheduled for that afternoon. Diana had 3 hours to prepare, which she spent mostly trying not to panic. She'd done press conferences before during her test pilot days, but that was when she'd been Colonel Diana Richardson, confident and at the peak of her career. Now she was 60-year-old Diana Archer, a woman who'd spent 2 years hiding from that past. Colonel Walker found her in the maintenance office, reviewing talking points the public affairs team had prepared. How are you holding up? He asked. I've flown experimental aircraft at Mach 3, Diana said, but somehow this is more terrifying. Walker smiled. For what it's worth, the pilots are talking about you like you're a myth come to life. The younger ones are Googling your old speed records. The older ones remember when you were active. You're a legend. I don't want to be a legend. I just want to do my job. Maybe, but you're also a role model, whether you want to be or not. There are a lot of female pilots on this base who are going to see that a woman can have a 40-year career at the highest levels of aviation. That matters. Diana hadn't thought about it that way. At 1400 hours, she walked into the base conference room where the press conference was being held. Cameras lined the back wall. Reporters filled the seats. The room went silent when she entered. General Hayes introduced her. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Colonel Diana Richardson, retired. She served in the Air Force for 38 years as a test pilot and flight instructor. She holds 3 speed records, was the first woman to fly multiple classified experimental aircraft, and has logged over 15,000 flight hours. After retirement, she chose to continue serving as a civilian contractor here at Nellie's. Yesterday, she used her expertise to help talk down an F-16 experiencing an in-flight emergency. Colonel Richardson will make a brief statement and take a few questions." Diana stepped to the microphone, her heart pounding. "Thank you, General Hayes. I want to start by saying that the real hero yesterday was Captain Davis, who executed a very difficult emergency landing under pressure. I simply provided guidance based on my experience with similar situations." She paused. "I've spent my career working with aircraft and the people who fly them. That work continued after my retirement. I'm grateful I was in a position to help yesterday, and I'm grateful Captain Davis is safe." A reporter raised her hand. "Colonel Richardson, why were you working as a maintenance contractor when you could have had much more prestigious positions?" "Because I wanted to work with aircraft without the pressure of my past reputation. I wanted to be judged on my current work, not my old accomplishments." "Do you regret your anonymity being revealed?" Diana considered the question honestly. "I would have preferred to remain private, but if what happened yesterday helps people understand the value of experience and expertise in all forms, then perhaps some good came from it." Another reporter: "What was it like being one of the first women in military test flying?" "Challenging. I had to work twice as hard to get half the respect. But I had mentors who believed in me and gave me opportunities. I tried to do the same for the pilots I trained." "Do you have a message for young women interested in military aviation?" Diana thought about Lieutenant Morrison's disrespect, about the assumptions people made, about the decades of proving herself over and over. "My message is this: if you have the skill and the dedication, you belong. Don't let anyone tell you different. And when people doubt you, and they will, use it as motivation to be so good they can't ignore you." The questions continued for 20 minutes. Diana answered them honestly but carefully, not revealing classified information but also not hiding who she'd been. Finally, General Hayes ended the conference. "Thank you all. Colonel Richardson needs to get back to work." As Diana left the room, she was mobbed by base personnel wanting autographs, photos, and just to shake her hand. It was overwhelming but also strangely touching. Captain Davis found her in the crowd. "Ma'am, would you be willing to speak to my squadron, share some of your experience? I think it would really help the younger pilots." Diana started to say no, then stopped. "What would you want me to talk about?" "Decision-making under pressure, how to stay calm in emergencies, what you've learned from 40 years of flying." Whenever you're available, tomorrow, next week." Diana made a decision. "Tomorrow, 900 hours, I'll be there." That evening, the story went national. Legendary test pilot working anonymously at Nellie's saves F-16. The video of the press conference was shared widely. Social media exploded with people discussing her career and her choice to work quietly after retirement. Diana's phone rang constantly. Her children called, proud and emotional. Former colleagues reached out. Aerospace companies offered consulting positions. And through it all, Diana felt something unexpected: relief. She'd been carrying the weight of hiding for 2 years. It had been exhausting pretending to be less than she was, accepting disrespect without defending herself, watching people assume she was incompetent. Now that burden was gone. She could be herself again, all of herself, past and present. The next morning, Diana walked into the squadron briefing room to find it packed. Not just Captain Davis's squadron, but pilots from across the base. Word had spread that Colonel Richardson was speaking. She looked at the sea of faces, young and eager, skeptical and curious, male and female, and felt the familiar weight of responsibility. "Good morning," she began. "I'm Diana Richardson. Some of you know my history. Some of you Googled me last night." Laughter rippled through the room. "But my history isn't why I'm here. I'm here because yesterday, a pilot faced an emergency and handled it well. And I want to talk about why he succeeded and what that teaches us about flying. For the next hour, Diana shared lessons from 40 years of aviation. She talked about the time she'd lost an engine during a test flight and had to dead-stick land an experimental aircraft. About the crash that had nearly killed her and what she'd learned from her mistakes. About the hundreds of decisions that separated a good pilot from a great one. She was honest about her failures, her fears, her close calls. She didn't present herself as a fearless hero, but as a professional who developed expertise through experience and learning. The pilots listened with rapt attention. During the question period, a young female lieutenant raised her hand. "Ma'am, did you face discrimination as a woman test pilot?" "Yes," Diana said simply. "Constantly. I was told I didn't belong, that I was a diversity hire, that I was taking a spot from a more qualified man. I had to be perfect when my male colleagues could be merely competent." "How did you handle it?" "I worked harder, I became better, and I found allies, both men and women, who judged me on my skills, not my gender. It wasn't fair that I had to work twice as hard. But I did it anyway because the alternative was quitting, and I loved flying too much to quit." Another pilot asked, "What's the most important thing you've learned in your career?" Diana thought about it. "That ego kills. The moment you think you know everything, the moment you stop learning and listening, you become dangerous. To yourself and others, stay humble, stay curious, stay open to learning from anyone, regardless of their rank or title or appearance." She looked directly at Lieutenant Morrison, who was in the audience. "Because sometimes the person who can save your life looks like someone you dismiss. Respect expertise wherever you find it." Morrison nodded, getting the message. After the presentation, pilots lined up to talk to Diana individually, to ask for advice, to share their own experiences, to simply thank her for her service. Colonel Walker approached as the crowd thinned. "That was powerful. You should do more of these." "I'm a maintenance contractor, Colonel, not a motivational speaker." "You're whatever you choose to be, but I think you've got more to offer than coordinating work orders." Over the next week, Diana found herself pulled in multiple directions. General Hayes wanted her to advise on training programs. Aerospace companies wanted her expertise on new aircraft designs. Universities wanted her to lecture. And through it all, she still had her regular job coordinating maintenance. She was exhausted, but also energized in a way she hadn't been in years. 10 days after the press conference, General Hayes called Diana to her office. "Colonel Richardson, I have a proposal. The Air Force wants to create a new position, Senior Aviation Advisor for Nellies. You'd split your time between hands-on maintenance work and advising on training, safety protocols, and aircraft evaluation. It's a GS-14 position with significantly higher pay." "I'm not looking for more responsibility or money," Diana said. "I know, but we're looking for expertise. Your knowledge is too valuable to waste on work orders. We need your input on how we train pilots, how we maintain aircraft, how we develop the next generation of aviators." Diana thought about the young pilots she'd spoken to, about the questions they'd asked, about the impact she could have if she stepped out of the shadows completely. "Can I still do hands-on work? Actually get my hands dirty with aircraft?" "Absolutely, that's part of the appeal. You won't just advise from an office. You'll work alongside mechanics and pilots." "Then I accept." "Excellent, there's one more thing. Red Flag starts again next month. I'd like you to be part of the observation team. Give us your expert assessment of how our pilots perform in simulated combat." "I'd be honored." The new position started 2 weeks later. Diana found herself in meetings with senior officers, reviewing training curricula, and providing input on aircraft modifications. But she also still spent time on the flight line, inspecting aircraft and mentoring young mechanics. She was using all of herself now, her technical knowledge, her flight experience, her teaching ability, her hard-won wisdom. And something remarkable happened. The young pilots who dismissed her began seeking her out. Lieutenant Morrison became one of her most eager students, asking detailed questions about aircraft systems and emergency procedures. "Why the change?" Diana asked him one day. Morrison looked embarrassed. "Because I realized I was an idiot. I judged you based on your appearance and dismissed your expertise. That's exactly the kind of thinking that gets pilots killed. You taught me that competence doesn't have a specific look or age or gender." That's a good lesson to learn, Diana said. I'm trying to do better, to see people for their capabilities, not my assumptions. 1 month after taking the new position, Diana stood on the observation deck during red flag exercises, watching pilots from around the world engage in simulated combat. Beside her were Colonel Walker, General Hayes, and several other senior officers. "What's your assessment?" Hayes asked as they watched an F-35 squadron execute a complex attack pattern. Diana watched through binoculars, analyzing their formation, their timing, their execution. "Lead pilot is excellent. Number 3 is hesitant on his turns, losing optimal position. Number 2 is overcorrecting for wind, wasting fuel. Overall, good execution, but room for improvement." "That's exactly what our senior instructor said," Walker noted. "Your eye is still sharp. 40 years of watching pilots fly tends to teach you what to look for." They continued observing. Diana provided commentary, catching details the other observers missed. Her expertise was evident with every observation. As the exercise continued, an unexpected alert came through. A civilian aircraft had wandered into the restricted airspace around the red flag exercise area. The tower scrambled to contact the civilian pilot, but there was no response. "Get our aircraft clear," Hayes ordered. "Redirect them to secondary targets." But the civilian aircraft was on a direct intercept course with one of the F-35 formations. There was a risk of collision. Diana watched through the binoculars, assessing the situation with professional detachment. "The civilian aircraft is a twin-engine Cessna," she said. "Based on its flight path, the pilot may be experiencing navigation equipment failure. He's flying straight and level, not maneuvering." "How can you tell?" Walker asked. "No deviation in heading. Constant altitude. That's what you do when you're lost and your instruments fail. Maintain heading and altitude while you troubleshoot." "We need to get him out of there before one of our fighters hits him," Hayes said. Diana made a decision. "Let me talk to him, pilot to pilot." She grabbed a radio and switched to the civilian emergency frequency. "Civilian aircraft in restricted airspace. This is Diana Richardson on emergency frequency. Do you copy?" Static, then a panicked voice. "I copy. My GPS failed. I'm lost. I can see military jets around me. Am I in restricted airspace?" "You are, but we're going to get you out safely. What's your aircraft type and fuel status?" "Cessna 310. I've got about 90 minutes of fuel." "Good. I'm going to vector you out of the restricted area. Follow my instructions exactly." For the next 15 minutes, Diana calmly guided the civilian pilot out of the restricted airspace and toward the nearest civilian airport. Her voice was steady, reassuring, professional. When the civilian aircraft was clear and safely on approach to Henderson Executive Airport, Diana set down the radio. The observation deck was silent. Then Colonel Walker started clapping. The applause spread until everyone on the deck was applauding. "That's twice you've saved a pilot in a month," Hayes said. "You're making a habit of this." "Just doing what needs to be done," Diana said. But inside, she felt something shift. This was who she was supposed to be, not hiding in an office, but using every skill she'd developed to keep people safe. The story of Diana guiding the lost civilian made the news again, but this time, she didn't mind the attention as much. Because she wasn't hiding anymore. She was Diana Richardson again, and that felt right. 3 months after Diana's identity became public, Nellie's Air Force Base announced a special ceremony. They were dedicating a new building, the Colonel Diana Richardson Center for Aviation Excellence. Diana had tried to talk them out of it. She'd argued that she didn't need or want a building named after her, but General Hayes had insisted. "This isn't about what you want," Hayes had said. "It's about what you represent: excellence, perseverance, a lifetime of service. We need symbols like that." The dedication ceremony was scheduled for a Saturday morning in December. Diana's children flew in from across the country. Former colleagues drove from neighboring states. The base invited retired test pilots, current fighter squadrons, and aerospace industry representatives. Diana stood backstage in the auditorium, wearing a simple blue suit, feeling nervous. Her daughter Lauren squeezed her hand. "You okay, Mom?" "I'm not used to being the center of attention anymore." "You were the center of attention for decades. You just forgot what it felt like." Marcus, her son, smiled. Dad would be so proud right now. Diana felt tears prick her eyes. Her late husband had been her biggest supporter, attending every award ceremony, every promotion, every milestone. She wished he could be here for this. He'd probably tell me I'm making too big a deal of this, Diana said. No, Marcus said. He'd tell you to stand up straight and own what you've accomplished. The ceremony began. General Hayes gave opening remarks, highlighting Diana's career achievements. Then several former colleagues spoke, test pilots Diana had flown with, mechanics she'd worked with, younger pilots she'd mentored. They told stories Diana had forgotten, times she'd helped a struggling pilot master a difficult maneuver, emergencies she'd handled with calm expertise, innovations she'd suggested that became standard practice. Listening to them, Diana realized something. She'd spent so much energy in retirement trying to minimize her past accomplishments, thinking humility meant making herself small. But that wasn't humility, it was hiding. Real humility was acknowledging what she'd done while remaining open to learning. It was using her expertise to help others while recognizing she didn't know everything. Then it was Diana's turn to speak. She walked to the podium and looked out at the audience. Hundreds of faces, young pilots, experienced officers, civilians from the aerospace industry, her family. Thank you all for being here, Diana began. When General Hayes told me they were naming a building after me, my first reaction was to say no. I've never been comfortable with this kind of recognition. I've always believed that the work matters more than the person doing it. She paused, but over the past few months I've learned something. When we hide our accomplishments, when we minimize our expertise, we don't just diminish ourselves. We diminish what's possible for others. Young pilots need to see that careers like mine are possible. Young women need to see that they can reach the highest levels of aviation. Everyone needs to understand that expertise comes from decades of dedicated work, not from flash and ego. Diana looked directly at the section where young pilots from Nellie's were sitting. 3 months ago, I was working anonymously, accepting disrespect from people who assumed I didn't know anything because of my age and gender. I thought staying quiet was the humble thing to do. But I was wrong. Silence in the face of disrespect doesn't serve anyone. She saw Lieutenant Morrison in the audience, listening intently. Now I stand here fully myself, all my history, all my experience, all my expertise. And I'm telling you, respect knowledge wherever you find it. The person who can save your life might not look like what you expect. They might be older or different or working in a role that seems beneath their capabilities. Your job is to recognize expertise and learn from it. Diana's voice strengthened. This building will be a training center. Young pilots will learn here. Experienced aviators will share knowledge here. And I hope that everyone who walks through these doors remembers that excellence isn't about ego or flash or looking the part. It's about dedication, continuous learning, and using what you know to serve others. She looked at her children. My husband, who couldn't be here today, taught me something important. He told me that gifts are meant to be used, not buried. For 2 years, I buried my gifts, thinking I was being humble. But I was really being selfish, keeping my knowledge to myself when others could benefit from it. Diana took a breath. So here's my commitment to all of you. I will spend whatever years I have left in aviation sharing everything I know, teaching, mentoring, advising. I won't hide anymore. And I won't let anyone else hide their expertise either. We owe it to each other and to this profession we love to be fully ourselves. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Diana felt tears on her cheeks but didn't wipe them away. After the ceremony, there was a reception in the new building. Diana toured the facility, state-of-the-art classrooms, flight simulators, briefing rooms, and a museum section that included artifacts from her career. In the museum section, she found a display that made her stop. It was the helmet she'd worn when she set the speed record in the X-43. Beside it was the flight suit from her first test flight. And mounted on the wall was the Distinguished Flying Cross she'd earned for bringing back a damaged aircraft and saving millions of dollars of equipment. We borrowed those from your house, Lauren said, appearing beside her. Hope you don't mind. You went through my closets. Mom, you had legendary aviation artifacts gathering dust in your garage. They belong here, where people can learn from them. Diana looked at the display. A plaque read, Colonel Diana Richardson flew with courage, skill, and determination for 38 years. She set records that still stand. She trained generations of pilots. She never stopped learning. She never stopped serving. This is what excellence looks like. It's too much, Diana said. It's exactly enough, Marcus said, joining them. Mom, you've spent your whole life making the impossible look easy. Let people see that. Let them be inspired by it. A young woman in a flight suit approached hesitantly. Colonel Richardson, I'm Lieutenant Sarah Chen. I'm in training to be a test pilot. Nice to meet you, Lieutenant. I just wanted to say, reading about your career is what made me apply for the test pilot program. Knowing that a woman succeeded at the highest levels gave me courage to try. So thank you. Diana smiled. What's the hardest part of the training for you? Honestly, dealing with some of the guys who don't think I belong. What do you do about it? I outfly them, Chen said with a grin. Every single time. Eventually, they stop questioning whether I belong and start asking for tips. That's exactly right, Diana said. Excellence is the best response to doubt. Over the next hour, Diana met dozens of young pilots. She answered questions about emergency procedures, aircraft systems, career decisions. She signed autographs and posed for photos. And for the first time in years, she felt fully alive. That evening, after the crowds had gone and the building was quiet, Diana walked through the empty classrooms. She imagined the pilots who would train here, the knowledge that would be shared, the lives that would be saved through better training. General Hayes found her in one of the briefing rooms. Quite a day, Hayes said. Overwhelming, but good. I have one more request. The Air Force Academy wants you to give their commencement address next spring. Talk to the graduating cadets about service and excellence. Diana started to refuse, then stopped. That was the old Diana hiding. The new Diana, or rather the Diana who'd rediscovered herself, would embrace opportunities to serve. I'll do it, she said. Thank you, you're making a real difference, Diana. Not just in what you teach, but in what you represent. 6 months later, Diana stood before 1,000 graduating Air Force Academy cadets and their families. She wore her old uniform, the ribbons and badges representing decades of service. When I was your age, Diana told them, I dreamed of flying. I wanted to go faster, higher, further than anyone had gone before, and I did some of that. But I learned that the real measure of a career isn't the records you set or the medals you earn. It's the people you help, the knowledge you share, the example you set. She looked at the young faces before her. Some of you will fly, some will lead troops, some will work in areas you can't even imagine yet, and all of you will face moments when people doubt you, when they question whether you belong, when they judge you on your appearance rather than your abilities. Diana's voice was strong and clear. In those moments, remember this, you don't need anyone's permission to be excellent. You don't need validation from people who can't see your worth. You just need to know who you are, what you're capable of, and commit to serving something bigger than yourself. She paused. 2 years ago, I was working anonymously at Nellie's, letting people disrespect me because I thought humility meant making myself small. I was wrong. True humility is knowing your worth and using it to serve others. It's being confident in your abilities while remaining open to learning. It's standing tall in your expertise while lifting others up. Diana smiled. So stand tall, graduates, serve with excellence, share your knowledge, mentor the next generation, and never, ever let anyone convince you to be less than you are. The ovation was thunderous. After the ceremony, as Diana was leaving, she encountered a group of female cadets waiting to speak with her. Colonel Richardson, one of them said, we're all going to flight training. Some people have told us it's too hard, that we should consider other career paths. What do you think? Diana looked at each of them. I think flight training is hard. It should be hard. Flying military aircraft is a tremendous responsibility, but hard doesn't mean impossible. I did it. Thousands of women have done it, and you can too if you commit to excellence. What if we fail? Another cadet asked. Then you'll learn from the failure and try again, or you'll find a different path where you can excel. But don't fail because you didn't try. Don't fail because someone convinced you that you couldn't succeed. Fail only if you gave it everything you had and it genuinely wasn't the right fit. The cadets thanked her and left, walking a little taller. Diana drove back to Nevada that night, exhausted but fulfilled. Her quiet retirement had become a very public encore career, but it felt right. 1 year after the building dedication, Diana stood on the runway at Nellie's during another red flag exercise. She was there as senior observer, watching pilots from multiple countries execute complex combat scenarios. Beside her was Lieutenant Morrison, who'd been promoted and was now one of the exercise controllers. "Ma'am, do you miss flying?" he asked. Diana watched an F-35 streak past overhead, every single day. "Why don't you fly? You could get certified in civilian aircraft, fly for pleasure." "I've thought about it, maybe someday." They watched in silence as the exercise continued. Then Morrison said, "I wanted to thank you again for how you handled my disrespect a year ago. You could have destroyed my career. Instead, you taught me." "You taught yourself," Diana said. "You had the humility to learn. That's the mark of a good officer." An alarm sounded. Another aircraft emergency, an F-16 with a hydraulic failure. Diana and Morrison moved to the command center where they could monitor the situation. The pilot was calm, working through emergency procedures, heading for the runway. Diana watched on the monitors, ready to intervene if needed. But the pilot executed a perfect emergency landing, just as trained. "Well done," Diana said into the radio. "Textbook emergency landing." "Thank you, ma'am," the pilot responded. "I remembered what you taught us in that briefing last month. Small inputs, trust your training, stay calm." Diana smiled. This was why she'd stopped hiding. These moments when her knowledge and experience helped keep people safe. That evening, Diana sat in her office at the Richardson Center for Aviation Excellence, reviewing training schedules for the next month. On her wall were photos from her test pilot days, alongside recent photos of her working with young pilots. Her phone rang. It was General Hayes. "Diana, I have news. The Aviation Hall of Fame wants to present you with a Lifetime Achievement Award at their annual ceremony. It's a big deal, televised, lots of media coverage. Normally, you'd shy away from this kind of thing, but I'm hoping you'll reconsider." Diana looked at the photos on her wall, at the young pilots she was teaching, at the legacy she was building not through hiding but through sharing. "I'll do it," she said. "Not for me, but for everyone who needs to see that excellence is possible, that long careers are possible, that you can serve at the highest levels and remain humble and keep learning." "That's the Diana Richardson I remember," Hayes said warmly. After the call, Diana walked out to the flight line. The sun was setting, painting the Nevada sky in brilliant oranges and reds. Aircraft sat in neat rows, ready for tomorrow's missions. She'd spent 2 years trying to be invisible, accepting disrespect, hiding who she was. She'd thought that was humility. But she'd learned that real humility wasn't about being small. It was about being fully yourself while serving something greater. A civilian had walked onto the runway a year ago, an ordinary-looking older woman who pilots had dismissed and disrespected. And then they'd learned who she really was. Not just a legendary test pilot, not just a speed record holder, not just a decorated officer, but a teacher, a mentor, a symbol of what dedication and excellence could achieve over a lifetime. The pilots had stopped in silence that day, not because of her past achievements, but because they'd finally seen what expertise looked like when you'd been too blind to recognize it. Diana Richardson had taught them the most important lesson of her career: respect knowledge wherever you find it. Excellence doesn't announce itself, it simply is. And now, instead of hiding that excellence, Diana shared it freely. The runway lights flickered on as darkness fell. Tomorrow, more pilots would train, more knowledge would be shared, more lives would be saved through better preparation. And Diana would be there, fully herself, serving the profession she loved. No longer invisible. No longer hiding. Just Diana Richardson, doing what she'd always done best, making others better through her expertise, her dedication, and her unwavering commitment to excellence. The silence had turned to respect, and the respect had turned to legacy. A legacy that would endure long after she was gone, in every pilot who learned to see beyond appearances, to value knowledge over assumptions, and to understand that the most important person in the room might be the one you'd otherwise overlook. That was the real lesson, and it was a lesson worth teaching.